What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix. I'm Ryan Coop here with another edition of the CFL Offseason News Roundup. This time going through all of the news from the past 3 weeks from the CFL's East Division teams, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Montreal Alouettes, Ottawa Red Blacks, and Toronto Argonauts. If you missed it, yesterday I went through all of the news relating to the West Division teams that is currently out on the channel there. I decided to break it up division by division because boy has there been a lot of CFL news in the past number of weeks to go through. So we'll go through it all here for the East Division teams. Lots of movement as teams get ready for CFL Free Agency Day, which kicks off on February 8th. So we're just about a week or two away at this point in time. Teams trying to get pieces locked up before they hit the open market. Let's dive right in and take a look at the latest off-season news. Before we go to the East Division teams, one additional note on the West Division. As of today, the Saskatchewan Roughriders re-signing kicker Brett Lauder to a contract extension. One of the best kickers in the CFL in the past couple of seasons, back for another year with the Riders. It's a great extension there for them. Okay, let's get into the East Division. We'll go through the teams in alphabetical order, and so we start off with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Let's take a look at what they've done since the last time we did a news update here, which I believe was January 8th. January 12th is where we begin, where the Ticats made their decision on who their starting quarterback is for 2022. We kind of all figured it was either going to be Dane Evans or Jeremiah Mazzoli. They were not going to be able to keep both of them. Well, they made it official when they signed quarterback Dane Evans to a 2-year contract extension. He's played in the Grey Cup the last 2 seasons. He's got 18 career starts, 29 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, almost 5,000 passing yards and a 70% completion percentage. I think this was the right call for Hamilton. I think, Evans is younger. He's got great potential ahead of him. No distraction of the 2-quarterback system anymore at this point. This is Dane Evans' team, and I think he's going to flourish in that role in Hamilton. Excited to see what he does. Hopefully he can stay healthy and have himself a full, successful season. Certainly, if you want to keep him healthy, you need a good offensive line, and the Ticats locked up a couple days later one of the most notable pieces on their O-line by bringing it back Chris Van Zyl on a 2-year extension. He's got 13 seasons in the CFL, 171 starts, just played 7 games in 2021 only due to injury. But he is a 3-time CFL All-Star and just 2 years removed from being the most outstanding offensive lineman in the league. They will be without offensive lineman Jordan Murray for this upcoming season because they have released him to pursue NFL opportunities. He played 9 games during the season for Hamilton in 2021. Moving along to January 17th, a couple of smaller moves here. Extending Nationals Gordon White at long snapper, Jarek Richards at linebacker, Joseph Banksy at offensive lineman, and Malcolm Campbell on the defensive line. All of them, kind of played a little bit here and there. Gordon White was the team's long snapper for all 14 games in 2021, so he's back for another season. Then we move along to the next day. A nice signing here. Wide receiver kick returner Poppy White back for another season in a Ticats uniform. He played 5 games in 2021, had 11 catches, 105 yards through the air and a touchdown. Also contributed nicely on the return game. Did have a big return touchdown near the end of the season there as well. I think that might have been in the playoffs actually. For Poppy White. So good piece back, nice young receiver to add back to the lineup. Back to the offensive line we go, where they signed offensive lineman Brandon Revenberg to a 2-year contract extension. He was the East Division most outstanding O-lineman this past season and has been a CFL All-Star 3 years in a row. So Dane Evans as the starting QB. He's got Van Zyl, he's got Revenberg back there. I think those are huge re-additions for the Ticats for this season. Going over to the defensive side of the ball, they have re-signed defensive back Tunde Adeleke to a 2-year contract extension. And, if you want to go to the Grey Cup, this is a guy you want on your team because he has played now in 4 consecutive Grey Cups with Calgary and with Hamilton. His whole career, he's made the Grey Cup every year he's played in the CFL, which is absurd. And he had himself a very fine season this year. Was an East Division All-Star, was also the Ticats nominee for Most Outstanding Canadian. 44 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions. A great season for him. A couple global defensive linemen re-signed by Hamilton on January 21st. Valentin Ganoa and David Izinion. Ganoa, 9 games with Hamilton in 2021, and Izinion played 1 game this year, was their 3rd round pick in the 2021 Global Draft. A couple days later, on January 22nd, the Ticats released fullback tight end Nikola Kalinic to pursue NFL opportunities. He played 14 games this season, had 11 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown. And he did go on to sign with the Indianapolis Colts. So much congratulations to him on the NFL contract and wish him nothing but the best down south. January 24th, the Ticats re-signed quarterback Jalen Morton, defensive lineman Raheem Bingham, and wide receiver Emmanuel Butler. All of them spent some time on the practice roster and with the team in training camp. Butler was released in the 2021 training camp, but is now being brought back. And then we get into probably the one of the 2 biggest pieces of news to talk about with the Ticats. It's the end of an era in Hamilton as Hamilton and wide receiver Brandon Banks have parted ways. They say it's mutual. Of course, more often than not, they will. But Brandon Banks' career in Hamilton is over. 8 seasons with the Ticats, 111 games. He's top 10 all-time in pretty much most of Hamilton's wide receiver and kick return records. 2019 was the most outstanding player in the CFL, but 2021 struggled a little bit there from normal standards for Banks. 10 games, 474 yards, and 2 touchdowns only. So we'll see where Banks goes next. My money would be on him going to Ottawa. I think they could very much use a piece like Banks at receiver. And we'll see if Sean Burke, former assistant GM in Hamilton, makes the call. It was a sad day on that day for a lot of Ticats fans, but the next day they got some good news at least. Linebacker Simone Lawrence signed to a new deal, 127 games in 8 seasons for him. He leads Hamilton all-time in tackles. And was the East nominee for Most Outstanding Defensive Player in 2021 for the 3rd time in his career. And then continuing on, same thing just yesterday, also re-signing running back Don Jackson to a 2-year contract extension. He only played 4 games this season for them in the regular season, but he did make an impact, was one of the most exciting running backs to watch down the stretch. 245 yards on the ground, 94 through the air, and a pair of touchdowns for Jackson, who kind of took over the starting role. It was Sean Thomas Erlington all season long, but Jackson takes over down the stretch and got the starts in the playoffs, and a 2-year deal for him. Should be at least in the rotation as the starter there going forward. That's all we've got on the Hamilton Tiger Cats to talk about here. We move on to the Montreal Alouettes. Not too many different things they have done in the past couple of weeks. They did make a trade back on January 14th with the Edmonton Elks to bring in defensive lineman Mike Moore and sending offensive lineman Tony Washington and running back Martese Jackson back the other direction. So, they lose a veteran offensive lineman here. They lose an option at kick returner, but they bring in a solid defensive lineman, I think, in Mike Moore, who has put up 48 regular season games with Edmonton over the last 4 years and 17 sacks in that time. No news for the next week or so for Montreal, but on January 21st, signing a number of depth players here. Offensive lineman Samuel Thomason played 2 games with them in 2021. The most notable along here They do also signing the 2021 draft pick Ethan McConzo at safety, defense back Prince Smith Jr., wide receiver Craig Rucker, offensive lineman Tyler Romer, who played 4 games in the XFL in 2020, wide receiver Ente Aguavin, and defensive lineman Brock Goenlock, who was their 8th round pick in 2020. January 24th, the Alouettes signed defensive lineman Nick Usher to a 2-year extension. He played 2 seasons with Edmonton before joining Montreal this past season. Had himself a good season. Played all 14 games at 35 tackles, 5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. A big piece of an Alouettes defensive line that was one of the top ones in the league. And sticking with their defensive line, one guy who will not be back is Jamal Davis II, who they have released to pursue NFL opportunities. In his first season with Montreal, he played 9 games, had 4 sacks, and a defensive touchdown. The Alouettes have also re-signed wide receiver kick returner Mario Alford to a 1-year contract extension. He played 5 games this season before missing the rest of it due to injury. Had 647 yards total, 1 return touchdown, and the highest punt return average in the CFL this past season. Alford making an impact right away when he joined Montreal in 2019, where he put up 2 return touchdowns in his first 2 games. So that's 3 across the last 2 seasons. One of the top explosive returners in the CFL. Let's hope he stays healthy and has a full season here. Same day on the 25th, they also added wide receiver Krishawn Hogan. Spent about the last 4 to 5 years bouncing around NFL rosters. Did play 10 career NFL games. January 26th, Montreal signed wide receiver Dante Apcher to a 1-year extension. He played 5 games, started 3 of them, put up 90 yards on 5 catches, and also contributed a bit on punt returns this season as well. And then rounding out the Alouettes news, a couple of transactions on January 27th. Fullback Alexander Gagne signed to a 2-year extension. He had 18 special teams tackles this year, which was 2nd in the CFL. He also forced a fumble. Also re-signing offensive lineman Nick Callender, who had 2 starts this year in his rookie season on the offensive line there. And signing defensive back Herb Waters, who spent some time in the NFL, some time in the XFL. Did play 1 game with the Elks, I believe, right at the end of the season in 2021. Was also on, I believe, in a training camp with Hamilton at some point as well. So that's your Alouettes roundup here as we move on to the Ottawa Red Blacks. Go back all the way to January 10th. The Red Blacks signing offensive lineman Jacob Ruby to a 2-year contract. He had been in Edmonton since 2017. Was a mainstay on that offensive line, but was released in 2021, a couple games into the year, for misrepresentation of his vaccine status. Now it sounds like he has gotten things cleared up now, has been fully vaccinated, and will be ready to go for the season this year. So if he's ready to go and has that all behind him, a solid player at the offensive line for a team that desperately needs some improvement there. On January 13th, the Red Blacks announced their 2022 coaching staff, which features head coach Paul Lapalisse, defensive coordinator Mike Benavides, special teams coordinator Bob Dice, offensive line coach Paul Charbonneau, receivers coach Alex Suber, quarterback coach Will Arndt, who is a former Red Blacks QB, played a couple games with them over a few seasons, a defensive line coach Kerry Bailey, linebackers coach Patrick Bourgeon, defensive backs coach Greg Knox, and the running back coach still to be determined. I think this is a solid coaching crew. I like Lapo as head coach, of course. Bob Dice been around a long time, special teams coordinator there. Mike Benavides, I think, is an excellent defensive coordinator. I like this coaching crew for Ottawa. As we move along, same day, they released a number of players, most notably among them quarterback Dominique Davis and wide receiver Kenny Stafford. would be the most notable among those. Also released were Patrick Carr at running back, linebacker Jared Fernandez, quarterback Tom Flacco, defensive back Brad Muhammad, defensive lineman Chigozie Noruka, wide receiver Irvin Phillips, offensive lineman Natai Rogers, defensive lineman Kadir Shepard, offensive lineman Juwan Bushell-Beatty, and offensive lineman Chris Ferguson. So, like I said, most notable, Dominic Davis, Kenny Stafford being released by the Red Blacks. Same day, they signed 7 players themselves. Defensive back Douglas Coleman II, defensive lineman Trey Hornbuckle, wide receiver Terry Williams, which I believe Williams returned some kicks last season for them when Devontae Dedmon was out of the lineup, and offensive lineman Clement Lebreau, wide receiver Anthony Mahungo, defensive back Tony Anderson, and kicker Jose Maltos, all being signed by Ottawa. A couple days later, on January 18th, they also signed 6 national players, most notably among them defensive back Jordan Bayou, who played 5 games this season and has 35 career games with 10 special teams tackles. Also signing national players, wide receiver Will Corby, fullback Mitch Raper, defensive line Shaheem Charles Brown, offensive lineman Eric Starkzala, linebacker Jersey Henry. Then we get into some bigger moves to round things out. January 20th, the Red Blacks signing wide receiver Nate Bahar to an extension. Had a solid season in 2021, 38 catches, 439 yards. He's played 4 seasons in the CFL between Edmonton and Ottawa. I like that piece there. I think he is an excellent option as a Canadian receiver for them. Then we fast forward a whole week from there. Really not a ton of news, big news from Ottawa so far throughout the offseason, bits and pieces here and there. But I think there may be still, new general manager Sean Burke trying to figure things out. And could we see them being aggressive on February 8th in free agency? I think so. One place they will need to replace is kick returner Devontae Dedmon, who was released to pursue NFL opportunities and has signed with the Miami Dolphins. I'm so sad to see Devontae Dedmon go. I've made it no secret here, on the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix all season long that he's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. And I'm sad to see him leave the CFL, but I'm happy for him that he gets the NFL opportunity, and wish him nothing but the best. And if it doesn't work out, hoping he comes back to the CFL, because he has been one of the most electrifying players. In fact, he set the CFL record for being the fastest to reach 5 career return touchdowns in just 15 games. Earned himself a CFL All-Star nomination and the league's most outstanding special teams player in 2021. So all the best to Devontae Dedmon in his NFL career. And just yesterday, January 28th, offensive lineman Sir Vincent Rogers signed a 1-day contract with the Red Blacks to retire. He did play the last 2 seasons with Edmonton, but really didn't play much due to injuries in that time. Most notably, though, 4 seasons with Ottawa from 2015 to 2018, 3 Grey Cup appearances, did win the Grey Cup one of those years, and has won the most outstanding offensive lineman award in the CFL before as well. So a great career for Sir Vincent Rogers. Sad to see, the way it ended with a couple injury-plagued seasons there, and all the best to him in his retirement. That's it for the Red Blacks, and finally we move on to the Toronto Argonauts. And take a look at what they have done. On January 11th, the Argos signing linebacker Solomon Ajayi spent time with the Cleveland Browns in 2020. The next day, re-signing defensive lineman Fabian Foote, a national defensive lineman, played 3 games for the Argos in 2021. Before that, had played 3 seasons in Montreal, where he put up 30 tackles and 3 sacks in 37 games. The next day, the Argos, a couple of other small moves here, re-signing defensive back Cam Glenn, who played 1 game late 2019 and was on their suspended list this past season, and signing quarterback Austin Simmons, who has spent some time, I believe, with Hamilton and Montreal in training camp practice roster situations there. January 17th, a couple nice re-signings here for Toronto. Kicker punter Boris Beattie, who hit 85% of his field goals this past season and was an Eastern All-Star at the position. He gets a contract extension. I believe he hit a ton of long field goals too. And there were some games where he was going 5 for 5 in a game. I think Beattie is one of the great kickers in the league right now, and happy to see him back in Toronto for another season. Also signing wide receiver DeVaris Daniels to an extension. 13 games this year, 4 touchdowns, 597 yards. His first season with Toronto. Spent some time with Calgary and Edmonton before then. I think a big piece to bring back to that Argos receiving group. Toronto announced their coaching staff for this coming year on January 19th. With Ryan Dinwiddie, of course, back as your head coach and offensive coordinator. Offensive line, Chris Sweet. Quarterback coach, Mike Miller. No, I'm not talking about the Mike Miller that is the fullback for the Bombers. Wide receiver pass game coordinator, Pete Costanza, who was the Bombers running back coach in 2021 and spent 12 years with Calgary before then. Running back quality control coach, Edwin Harrison. Defensive coordinator and defensive line coach, Corey Mace. Linebacking coach, Kevin Iben. Secondary coach, William Fields. Defensive backs, Joshua Bell. And special teams coordinator, Mickey Donovan, who spent the last 4 years as the special teams coordinator in Montreal. The only pieces back from this past season, Dinwiddie, Iben, and Bell. So a bit of a change. Despite the first place finish in the East Division, some notable changes here for Toronto, due in part to Chris Jones going over to Edmonton and taking a couple of guys with him there. January 24th, the Argos signed defensive back Matt Boateng to an extension. He played 2 seasons with Toronto and has had this past year had 12 games, 3 tackles on defense, 2 on special teams. Toronto also adding wide receiver DeMonte Coxey, who has played 41 games at the University of Memphis and worked out with Green Bay in the NFL in 2021. Then we get one of the bigger pieces off the free agent board, January 25th, the Toronto Argonauts signing linebacker Henoc Muamba to a contract extension. He was the most outstanding Canadian in the CFL back in 2019 when he played for Montreal. He's got 9 seasons in the CFL, and last year in his first year with Toronto put up a very, very good 49 defensive tackles and 1 interception in 10 games. An anchor there in the middle of that defense. And finally, last piece of news to talk about for the Argos, signing wide receiver Darius Robertson Jr., who was undrafted in the 2020 NFL draft, but did spend some time with Arizona and Seattle after that. So for Toronto, not too many major moves necessarily in the past 3 weeks, but Boris Beattie, DeVaris Daniels, Henoc Muamba, Matt Boateng, I think those are all excellent pieces for them to bring back and should be, crucial parts of this team for this season. So that's your update on the 4 teams out east. Again, if you want to hear what the teams out west have been up to, just go back, check out the previous video where I went through all of that. Stay tuned for more content to come, of course, as well in the next week and a bit, leading up to CFL free agency. I know I've previously already gone through the quarterback landscape heading into the day. I think this coming week we'll take a look at the running backs and maybe the wide receivers as well, see where teams are at currently, who's free agents, where they might possibly go. So look forward to that here on the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix. If you want to check out other CFL content, you can also check out a weekly podcast I do called the Canadian Football Countdown, which you can find on all your favorite podcast platforms or on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me there at CooperTrooper42. A link is in the video description. Do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you liked, what you didn't. Let me know what you think of these moves for these teams out east. Are you satisfied with what your team has done so far? Do you wish they would have done some things differently? Let me know in the comments section. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.